All right, here we are. This is Jay Brown Yoga Talks podcast. My name is Jay Brown. If this happens to be your first time here today, let me welcome you. Everyone else, what's up? How's everybody doing? Did you have an okay week? The plan for today is to talk some shop, to talk about the ins and outs of being a professional yoga teacher. And when I use the word professional, it demands further clarification. Sometimes when I have spoken to people about what it means to be a professional yoga teacher, the idea is that you have been able to monetize what you're doing and make a living at it. So it's not just a hobby, but you pay your way with it. You're a professional yoga teacher. However, I have also reflected upon that. And it's clear to me that I've known many a yoga teacher who were consummate professionals, who showed up on time, who were well-trained and effective at what they did and took it seriously and had all the hallmarks of what I think of as a professional, a pro at it, teaching yoga. But they don't know how to monetize what they're doing, and they're not necessarily making any money at it. So when we say professional, it can mean a couple of different things. I think today I am talking about the business side of things, and there are models that yoga teachers have been using for many years, and some of those models have fallen apart, and some of them have adapted to the new situation we're in. And I have certainly been thinking about that a lot as I've been opening this new center. And maybe first of all, I'll just give a little bit of update on what's going on with that. If you're new around here and you don't know it, I'm opening a yoga center, and I was supposed to start classes this week. However, there has been a small delay. You see, what happened is I put up a sign in the window, like over the last few weeks while we've been painting and getting the space in order. I just printed up on my computer a sign that said, "The Birdhouse Yoga Center, coming soon," with a picture of a bird on it. And I put them in the window, which is the same thing I did when I opened a yoga center in Brooklyn back in 2007. While we were doing it, I just put those signs up on the window so that when people were walking by, they would see it and they'd say, "Oh, wow, look, a yoga center is going to open." And then when it opened, maybe they would come, So I did the same thing here, and I put these signs up in the window. And somebody I know actually was walking by and saw it and took a picture of that in the window and then posted it on a Facebook group saying, "Hey, look, a new yoga center is opening on College Hill." Now, two things happened as a result of that Facebook post. One, somebody who works for the City of Easton Code Inspection Office saw the post and knows my landlord, is familiar with the person who opens that property. So she reached out to my landlord and said, "Hey, I saw that someone's opening a yoga center in your property. You need to tell him to come downtown and get his permits. Well, otherwise there could be issues." So my landlord reached out to me and said, "Hey, you got to go down and get the permits." And I said, "Oh yeah, I had intended to go downtown. I figured I would need to get like a business license maybe, and then maybe a permit to put a sign out front." Like I had that in mind. And so I was like, of course, I was planning to do that anyways. I went downtown to do that, and I quickly learned that the City of Easton has a much more complicated process than I thought. In Brooklyn, when I did it, you filled out the application, you paid the fee, and you were good to go. I thought maybe there would be like a week or two to process it, but the City of Easton does things totally different, and you have to do a certificate of occupancy, which means having a code inspector come, which really surprised me. When I bought a house here, that had to happen as part of the process of buying the house. You had to have the CO done, and the code inspector came and checked and made sure everything was up to code. I didn't think that I would need to do that as a renter. Even if it was a commercial property, I didn't think I was going to have this inspection done. In any case, so I went downtown, and I'd say even worse than finding out that I have to do more than I thought was that the process was really confusing. It was like a black box, and I had difficulty finding out what I need to do. So I haven't even been able to announce that I'm opening or like tell people, hey, we're starting classes and we're going to do the party. Like I've been on hold to find out what's going to happen. Because if I start opening before I have the permits, then they can close me down, apparently. So in any case, it has kind of sorted itself out. I have an inspection in 2 days. And apparently, even if there's some minor things, although we're not expecting anything, but if they did find anything, they will still give me a temporary CO so I can open right away. So it amounts to a week's delay. Now, on the flip side of that, someone else saw that same Facebook post who happened to be a reporter at the local newspaper, the Lehigh Valley Live. And so yesterday I was interviewed, and they're going to do a story about me in the center in a local paper. So I got some press out of it. So it was a mixed bag of anxiety and stress over needing to follow some bureaucratic rules that exist in a black box and are very hard to discern, and some excitement around the center among some people I know in the neighborhood. So hopefully we'll be up and running soon, and people will come. Now, outside of my own individual stuff with the yoga center, I noticed this week there is some controversy and news coming out of the yoga therapy world. Longtime listeners know that used to be a big topic of conversation for me on this show. I would bring yoga therapists on and ask them to please distinguish yoga from yoga therapy for me. And, we've had lots of different ideas. Some people would say, well, yoga therapy is a specific application of yoga for people with specific conditions. Or some people, I remember Matthew Taylor came on and he admitted that a lot of it had to do with the perceptions of others, that if you were trying to get research money to do research on the efficacy of yoga and you told people you were a yoga teacher, it didn't have as much sway as if you said yoga therapist, so that it was kind of a marketing thing in some ways. Some people cite particular traditions of therapeutic applications and different lineages as the source of yoga therapy. But what my issue has always been was that people who are teaching yoga in a certain way that is geared more towards a therapeutic orientation are essentially doing the same things as yoga therapists. And a lot of times the only thing that's making them different is the context in which they're happening, or the way that someone thinks about their role. And I have told the story many times. I, in fact, wrote an article for the International Association of Yoga Therapists back in 2009 that was entitled "Yoga Therapy is Not Yoga." And that was really a play on words more than a statement. And back at that time, I remember I was in this meeting in 2009. It was called the Council of Schools Initiative. And it was like 50 of us who were all doing yoga teacher trainings with a therapeutic orientation. Some people were already identifying themselves as yoga therapists, but others were just doing yoga in a particular way that it was rooted in this idea of, the kosha's many layers of a person, not just anatomy and physiology. And I think for myself, I was really interested in, well, am I a yoga therapist? I wanted to distinguish what I was doing from all of the fitness orientation that was happening at the gyms and in other yoga centers. I was doing something very different. I wanted to work with people who were normally intimidated to go to a class like that, who a high impact class like that wouldn't be appropriate for them. Those were the people that I wanted to work with. And I thought, oh, am I a yoga therapist? Well, longer story shorter, there was a conversation going on about where to set the standards. They wanted to create standards for yoga therapy to distinguish it from just like getting a yoga teacher certification through the Yoga Alliance or whatever. And the discussion in the room was how high to set the bar. Some people wanted to set it super high, like 1,500 hour college level curriculum. Some people were talking about something a little bit less, like 800 hours, which is what they ended up settling on. And for myself at the time, I was already doing a 200-hour training, and I wasn't really interested in developing like an 800-hour program that involved medical learning so that you could interact with doctors. I wasn't interested in doing that, but I did want to distinguish what I was doing from all these other approaches. And frankly, I was doing many of the same things that yoga therapists were doing, like in terms of how you approach working with people and how you utilize the tools of practice. There really wasn't much distinction. In any case, I remember getting up in that meeting and making a very impassioned case to them that if you make a super high bar and you make an 800-hour standard, what that's going to do is it's going to relegate the kind of depth of yoga practice that we've been talking about in this meeting, the kind of therapeutic applications of yoga, the transformational healing aspects of yoga end up becoming called yoga therapy and relegated to like hospitals and universities. And most of the people I knew were not coming to yoga at hospitals and universities. They were going to the YMCA and to gyms and to yoga centers. And I was saying, I want to see more yoga therapy in all yoga classes. So I was advocating that the IAYT create a baseline standard to compete with Yoga Alliance 200 or 300 hours. I was saying create a 200-hour therapeutic yoga certification that is the prerequisite for a clinical yoga therapy degree where you would go again for another 800 hours to learn all the medical stuff and kind of go the clinical route. But I was saying that the IAYT should create its own introductory training, not use Yoga Alliance. And I definitely did not win that. I think they wanted to set a high bar, and I totally understood and respected that. Well, I'm telling you all of this because I just heard this last week that there's this huge controversy because the IAYT announced that they were going to start doing a 300-hour certificate program for healthcare professionals. And I think it's a bit of a response to yoga therapists wanting to be able to offer a training for people in the principles of yoga therapy without it having to be a full 800-hour program. Or I think maybe even more so that it's geared towards people who already have medical learning. So part of the 800-hour standard is all of this medical learning. And if you're someone who's already learned that because you're already a doctor or you're already a physical therapist or whatever, then you don't really need to learn that again. You don't need 800 hours. You could just do a 300-hour yoga therapy program, and that would be sufficient to really equip them. So a lot of the people who went to the trouble to pay all the money and invest all the time to become 800-hour certified yoga therapists aren't all too happy about it because it does, in a way, compete with a full-length program. And I think some people feel like it diminishes the sort of prestige of that accreditation. And that was what they were saying to me back then. That's why they set the bar high. They didn't want to do that. So in any case, I think one of the big issues also was that there wasn't a very open process. And then they tried to have like a town hall to get people's input after they announced it and everybody was mad. And so I'm not sure where it's at right now. I'm bringing it up because it feels to me indicative of certain aspects of being a professional yoga teacher right now and how people have had to adapt to the new situation and to what people are looking for and just the kind of fundamental pitfalls when we try to create these accreditations. And I hate to say it, but I kind of told you so. It seemed to me that at some point, if the purpose of having a yoga therapy credential was to distinguish that from just a regular yoga teacher, you got to kind of create your own. Anyways, so there's that. And all of this does bear some further relevance to my conversation today with Manu Molina. Manu and I met years ago when he was first figuring out a way to make a living as a yoga teacher. I'd say even more specifically to do that online as well as in person. And we met each other before the pandemic when I was in the midst of doing it. And I just shared a bunch of stuff that I was doing with him. And he's taken that and really rolled with it. And not only did he do his own thing, but now he's been helping mentor other people in how to do it as well. So it was really wonderful to hook up again with him after all these years and compare some notes. Manu is much more experienced than I am when it comes to doing retreats and also just a few other areas. So it was good to get his perspective, and it is my pleasure to be bringing it to you today. Real quick before we get to it, let me mention that I have a new group starting on my teacher training in October. October 21st is the start date for that. If you're interested in connecting with me in a much deeper way and getting into some study together, that is by far the most comprehensive way for us to do that. If a teacher training is a little bit too much to bite off right now, then there's certainly other ways that we might connect. There's ongoing live classes. There's a weekly discussion group. Or maybe you just want to become a supporter of this show and get full-length access to the archives by becoming a podcast premium subscriber. You can find out about all my stuff, the teacher training and the rest at jbrownyoga.com. Okay, y'all. We're going to leave it there. I will touch base with you on the other side, but let's go ahead and get to it. Let's listen to this conversation that I had with Manu Molina. Hello?
Hello, Jay.
Manu.
Hello. How are you?
I'm very well, my friend. It's good to hear your voice. It has been a little while.
Oh my gosh, this feels like a flashback to, I don't know, 3-4 years ago.
I know, no, it's funny how time is. And we had a moment together back when, and then we haven't really spoken, maybe a few emails, but it's nice to speak with you. Hi, Manu.
Yes, likewise, Jay. And thank you so much also for having me as a guest in your podcast. And it's super great to reconnect with you. And over these years, after we connected, I know sometimes, it has been like a month and a long time since we don't hear from each other, but I still hear from you now and then because I get to listen to your podcast.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, you know the deal. I'm already recording, so we just began, yes. Okay? I don't want there to be any surprises.
Yes.
Very cool.
I know the deal.
Very cool. Well, I was trying to remember back when. So you said 3 years ago. So it was during the pandemic. I thought we had met maybe before, or was it during the pandemic?
Actually, yes, it was before. It was before. You're right.
Yes, we had met before the pandemic happened, if I recall. Yeah. And I was trying to remember, maybe you joined in on the teacher Sangha for a while. And I think you were doing maybe like one-to-one personal training in yoga teaching and kind of living in other countries. I can't really remember. Maybe you can refresh my memory. What were you doing when we spent that time doing Zoom meetings before the pandemic? And then we could get to kind of what you're doing now.
Yeah, so that sounds like a long time ago. Well, indeed, I think it started in 2018, the first time you and I connected.
Okay.
By that time, I have been listening to your podcast for some time, and then I decided to join the Teacher Sangha. Mm-hmm. And it was 2018, 2019. I believe that's the period that I was coming to your classes as part of the teachers community. Mm-hmm. And back at that time, I was, you're right, you have a good memory. I was doing mainly one-on-one personal training and yoga. And I was living in Bangkok, Thailand.
Right.
Yes.
Okay. And I remember the conversations that you and I were having around then. I was in the space in Allentown, and it was all about if it was possible to sort of not have to be in the studio model or to kind of have your own independent platform, basically.
Yes, exactly. These were part of the conversations we were having back at the time. And it was part also of the conversations we were having. Actually, part of the things that I was doing back then, I was also teaching some in-person retreat. I think you and I had some conversation about that as well.
Right, organizing retreats. That's right.
Yes.
That's right.
Yes, that's correct. And it was very helpful to have this time together with you and with other teachers from around the world, because it was a good way to stay connected to what's happening internationally in the yoga world. Mm-hmm. And also, I have to say that, during that time, that was pre-pandemic, and there was not, as we know, there was not much online yoga with a few exceptions, and you were one of those exceptions. And actually, having this contact with you, it was very inspiring for me also to start doing things online and to bring more things online. And that was one of the key elements that then, within the mix of COVID and everything, allowed me to kind of transform into what I'm doing today. But yeah, definitely setting up things online for me was kind of an important thing back at the time, because as I've mentioned, I was living in Bangkok. 2019 was the year I kind of set up my company here as a foreigner. It's not an easy thing to do as a foreigner, because it's kind of a long process and so on and so forward. And as I mentioned, I was doing the one-on-one clients, teaching in person mainly. I also was doing the retreats, which basically was my main, kind of my main source of revenue when I was, and that was like kind of one of the main reasons I founded the company here, because my retreats were mainly here in Thailand. And actually also during that time, and this is when I say that I got also a lot of inspiration from you, I started teaching Zoom yoga classes and fitness classes, because some of the people who would come to my retreats, they would want to continue with me, working with me, and maybe they were from Europe, and they were like, Manu, I would love to continue with you, but I don't know, I'm going to be in Europe. And I was like, don't worry, we can do that via Zoom. Yes. And that was 2019. And people were like, what is that?
Yes. Well, it's funny. I'm remembering it much clearer now, how I had initially started doing, it was just one-way live streams through YouTube. So I couldn't see anybody, but they could see me. And then shortly after I moved here, we switched over to Zoom meetings. And that was pre-pandemic, before anybody had really heard about them, but they had already figured it out and they were working really good. And I was also doing a lot of traveling at that time in 2018 and 2019 when we were hanging out and Zoom meetings. And the same thing had happened to me. I had had this center for 10 years and I had met all these people, and then I closed the center and all those people wanted to stay connected with me, and doing classes online was the way for us to do that. And then I think the conversations we were having also had to do with how it's actually not that hard, like how everybody kind of freaked out when the pandemic happened and it seemed like a really hard thing to do, but actually it wasn't that hard. It was like an email list and a Zoom account, basically,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so kind of like making it seem, oh, it's not that hard. You could definitely do it. That was sort of the conversation we were having.
Yeah.
I'm doing it. You could do it. It's not that hard. That was connected to yoga teachers not having to necessarily teach at yoga centers, especially if they have people who want to practice with them who don't live where they live,
Yeah, exactly. And also, as you mentioned, working towards doing that independent living and not depending so much to the studio model, because I remember that was also one of the main kind of issues that happened with yoga teachers was like, working with the studio could be a great thing for exposure and for connecting with people, networking, and so on. But as a business model, just working for yoga studio, it's not something sustainable. So the conversations also were going around that way of making these things work for you in a way that you are more independent. And so I really, really appreciated that time. And I think it was a key time for me as well for what was coming next, which of course we didn't know what was coming. But then 2020 kind of shifted things for everyone. Yeah.
I certainly felt like those conversations and the experience of doing those meetings, of having Zoom meetings with other yoga teachers and having them be really cool, like really good conversations and really honest and stuff. And I think that made me feel like, oh, you can really do stuff online. Because prior to that, I really was kind of against online teaching. But that was the time where I sort of proved it to myself, like, no, you can really have yoga with people online. And that it didn't have to be, the main thing was like, in terms of it being independent, my former business partner, Josh, would say, you have to own your own digital landscape, which means like, you gotta be able to have the email list, not somebody else, like there was like a few key points to just like, making sure you don't give away your store to some online portal or whatever.
Yeah, absolutely. And it can be very simple, as you say, just having the email list and the Zoom account would be enough to do so,
Well, that's what we were discovering, that actually, and this holds true, because I remember it started in those conversations, but I've talked to a lot of people about it since, where when the pandemic happened, everybody learned this, like all the yoga teachers, nobody had any gigs at the centers, right? And everybody went online, and people started to discover, if you have like 5 to 10 people or whatever of your email list of 25 people, but 5 to 10 of your 25 people on your email list really want to take class with you every week and are willing to pay like whatever, $10 a class or whatever price feels reasonable. We could talk about pricing. Actually, I would like to talk with you about that today. But you can, a lot of people I know were making more money off of their email list of 25 people than they were teaching at the center, is what I was saying.
Totally.
And that was quite an epiphany.
Yeah.
Now I do think that there's been a little bit of backlash, like the Zoom fatigue became real, like not as many people. I think because we had no choice for a while, like the only place you could do it was online. But not that doesn't mean that there's not still lots of online yoga happening. I still have lots of stuff going on online, but it's not like there was big boom. So what happened? Are you still in Thailand now?
I am. During this year's, I've been back and forward. It's a little bit of a long story, but at the moment we are recording this podcast, yes, it's 8 a.m. here in Bangkok. I know it's evening day before for you.
We're on the other side of the planet. See, look at that. There you go. There's the technology bringing us together.
Yes. So I was in Thailand when during 2020 when COVID, when the whole world kind of closed down. And I was here. By that time, I already had my company up and running. And as I mentioned, I had my private clients. I was also doing some collaborations with local studios and here in also some other places in Southeast Asia. And I was running my own international retreats. So things were, starting to feel good. And it was a little bit hard for me, to be honest, to be in this city back then, because it's like I don't know if you've ever been in Bangkok, but it's like a kind of a huge city. And of course, it has so many things to offer, and it's beautiful. Of course, the Thai culture is, wonderful, and I really love it. But that time, pre-COVID, I had this little in-person studio, and so I don't know. It was not really sustainable for me to kind of having to go almost every day to my client's home or to go to the studio. It was kind of very tiring. So this is when down the road, the online thing was made it, my relationship even with the city made it more sustainable and in a way better for me. But what happened was during 2020, everything had to be closed down. I was here in Thailand and I had to close up my studio. What happened at that time was many yoga teachers that I knew from previous years, because by 2020, it's been a few years that I was working in the yoga, especially the retreat industry. And I had contacts in my Facebook communities, my online communities, and people that I've met in person over the last few years. They were yoga teachers. And they saw me for a few months before COVID, that I was sharing about my online Zoom classes. And, not many people pay attention because, as we mentioned, this was before COVID. So people didn't even know that teaching online, many people didn't know that teaching online was an option, or learning yoga online and so on. But kind of that message of me going on Facebook and saying that I was doing online classes and stuff, when everything got closed down with COVID, people started to connect him, yoga teachers mainly. Hey, Manu, I saw that you are doing online classes. Would you mind letting me know how this works? Would you mind teaching me how to do this? And because there was quite a demand of people that I was receiving these questions for people, I was like, okay, let's put up a workshop and and I teach you everything that I know about teaching online for what I do with my clients and so on. So what happened was I had yoga teachers learning how to bring the teachings online. And some of those yoga teachers, they eventually become people who I work with. Initially, the thing that I taught them was how to teach online, but eventually the thing that they needed and the thing that they needed support with was, now I'm teaching online. Now I have, I've been able to, even though I have closed my studio, I'm able now to teach my classes online. But now the next thing that I need support. How do I market my classes? Because now the market, it's, as you say, it's easy to get online with a Zoom account and a bunch of people. But then also, if you want to expand, you need to market yourself. And many of these people, they didn't have any marketing experience. They didn't know how to, put their classes, their marketing out there in the internet.
They didn't know, you can make a website page and write some things and then put a buy button on there.
Exactly.
And then people will buy stuff from you.
Exactly. So that was kind of the things that they were needing support with, even also social media, because many people had social media, but also they didn't have any idea on how to present the work that they were doing. And because, of course, no one, unless you have been studying marketing or something like that, no one teach you how to present yourself as a professional. And in the yoga teacher trainings, I know this is something that it's coming more and more popular, which I'm happy with, like learning a little bit about marketing and business and so on. But back at the time.
Yeah, but a lot of times when we can talk about it, it's like about social media. And social media is not always the best marketing, but we can get to
true.
that. Yeah.
That's true. That's true. But yeah, basically that was this is where kind of my evolution, so to speak, in my teaching kind of happened, because at that time I've realized that this is what people that I was working with, they needed support with that. I had something to offer, because this was basically a process that I went through when basically the couple of years before, when I started establishing myself, establishing my company, and teaching online and creating my website and so on. And these were the things that I started teaching from 2020. And I also discovered that this was something I started feeling very passionate about. And in 2020, after having a few clients working with me, some of them one-on-one, some of them in group classes, everything to do with, learning how to create your online presence and so on, I decided that, okay, it is time for me to kind of focus on this specific work. Before that, I was teaching yoga, fitness, and so on. And that kind of, I stopped that, except for a few clients that I have that I kept working for the next year. And they were like kind of people that they've been working for me for a long time. I kind of stopped all of that. And I focus just mainly on working with yoga teachers and movement professionals, because at the end of the day, I also felt that was the people I was more connected with and the people that I liked to work the most. And so that was it. We're talking now about 2000 and this is the year 2020 when all of this is happening. At the same time, Jay, I had to close up my studio here because, as I've mentioned, my main source of revenue were retreats. I did have some online gigs going on, but honestly, considering all of the costs that a company, as a foreigner, a company had and carries here in Thailand, it wasn't worth for me to keep up a Thai company up and running at that time. And so I decided that the best thing was to close it up. So I had to basically close my business here. I moved towards the end of 2020. I moved back to Spain because closing up my business in Thailand meant that I couldn't work legally. I couldn't have a work permit or anything. So I had to go back to Spain. And that was a period of, we are talking about now 2021, 2000.
That was online. Everybody was online all the time.
Exactly. Everyone was online. Yeah.
Yeah. And okay, so all right, but then now we can get to what it's like to do stuff now. But you're back in Thailand. How long have you been back in Thailand?
So from 2021 that I came back to Spain until now, I've been coming on and off. I've been because I don't know. I think you remember that I'm married in Thailand. My partner, he lives here. He is from Bangkok.
I remember.
And so we try to do our best to spend time together. So what happened during COVID times, 2021, 2022 was I was able to come here, with all of those crazy, you needed to be at the hotel,
restrictions and everything.
Yes. Yeah. And so during these years, I've been able to go back and forward. And yes, and this is basically since 2020, this is what I've been able to be doing, just kind of being able to go back and forward. These things in the future may change for me because they have just, they are passing now the same-sex law, marriage. And so maybe in the future, I'm going to be able to spend here longer periods of time. But for now, I'm able to be here for some time and then go back to Spain.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Well, before we talk about what's happening now, I do want to go back to a few things that I find interesting about what's happened with you since we last spoke, particularly around this idea of what it is to market something. Mm-hmm. Because I know for myself, I didn't have any clue about marketing, and I didn't really want to have any clue about marketing, to be honest. Like, I got into yoga because I specifically didn't want to have anything to do with marketing. But at some point, I rode on just like pure yoga for a time with the yoga center. Eventually, though, the sort of hard realities of the financial overhead, you can't deny it. And then I did meet my friend Josh, who I think you may have met back then. I can't remember. And
I never met, but I've heard about him. Yeah.
Yeah. So Josh, he was somebody who, like, that's what he thought. He worked in film and music and like knew about business and marketing stuff in a way that I didn't. And so he was the person who really made like the first video with me, and we made a DVD, a yoga DVD, which very soon after became obsolete once everything started to be online. And it is interesting because over time, I think over the years, I certainly learned about what it is. And that's what you and I think we're talking about in 2018. Like a lot of the things that I had learned from Josh about like, oh, it's not that hard. And you put a buy button here and you got to try to write some things that is the kind of thing that attracts people to what you're doing, all the kinds of things that you were pointing to. Now, what I will say that has become kind of a thing, and I've spoken to some other teachers about this, who this has happened to as well, where, a yoga teacher is the person who like creates the content, as they would say sometimes these days. I don't always like that description for yoga teachers, but the person who like says the stuff or has the practice and does the teaching that ends up getting recorded, like the content. And you can have that, but not know, as you said, like a lot of yoga teachers are skilled as yoga teachers, but they have no idea how they would like monetize that. And so then somebody who knows how to monetize something well, let's say, takes that content that you created and then monetizes it and then makes money, right? Which is more of value? Like, which is more important, in that equation? Like, the person who does the marketing says, oh, well, you wouldn't have made any money if it wasn't for me, so I'm only giving you 30% or something like that, right? And a lot of times that creator, that content creator, that teacher, they're kind of okay with that because they're like, yeah, I don't know how to make money off this. Okay, I'll take 30%, right?
Yeah.
And that's fine for a while. But then eventually the yoga teacher learns and actually does know how to do it. As you learned how to do it,
Yeah.
And then sometimes it gets kind of sticky, in terms of like who owns it and who doesn't own it. But my point being that I certainly think it's important for a yoga teacher to have that kind of perspective, whether they know somebody that gives them that kind of perspective, which is where things can kind of get sticky in terms of the collaboration, or to learn it, like from what you're kind of doing, so that you have some sense of what it is to market your stuff, even just to the degree that makes sense for what you're looking to do,
Yes, I totally agree with that, Jay. And one thing I would say, and this speaks to what you mentioned before, is that I've seen one of the things that I see with yoga and wellness practitioners, people that I work with, is that often there is a rejection of even the word marketing. And I remember, before I started learning all of this stuff and getting more interested, like using the word like like marketing myself, which is something that I would say back at the time, it felt icky. I was like, I don't resonate with that, with marketing and so on. But for me, it all comes down to what do what's your definition of marketing is? Because sometimes we do have this idea in our minds that marketing may be like kind of, we all have this memory of, being at home, someone knocking the door, trying to sell you an encyclopedia or something like that. This
yes, like the sleazy salesman or whatever. Yeah,
exactly. So when you think about marketing, maybe the first thing that comes to your mind is that. But for me, what I've learned, and I've been also over the years, I've been learning from different people about marketing. And of course, I also have learned from those people that teaches you those sleazy techniques, and those are things that, of course, over the time, I realized that I don't connect with. But for me, the way I see marketing, Jay, it's communication. For me, marketing, it's about being able to communicate the value of what you're offering. And that, if you are a yoga teacher and you do know your staff, you know how to teach your staff, and you are willing to learn a little bit of how to put together a great core message that you are able to share with people, it's going to be easier for you to be independent, not to depend on those other marketing people or third parties that we were talking about before. Does that make sense?
It does. It makes a lot of sense. And I mean, I really relate to what you're saying in terms of different marketing techniques, because I have tried to educate myself on stuff. And there are things that, that you can do that are effective, that have been proven effective techniques, 40% off discounts or early bird discounts and things like that, which I kind of resisted for a while because I don't really like doing that. I just want to make a really fair price and then just have people get it. But that stuff does work. Some of it is kind of manipulative. It plays on certain aspects in people, but the reality of it is somebody who really wants to do my thing, when the 40% off comes up, sometimes that's the thing that gets them to do it.
Yeah.
And I believe in what I'm doing. To your point, I think mostly what I am doing, even when I am selling people or not selling people, I try to think of it as like notifying people.
Yes.
Notifying people that there's this opportunity to get 40% off, because I am hoping to communicate, like as you said, communicate what I'm doing and why I think it might be valuable to you,
Yes, absolutely. And, another truth, it's that, another truth about marketing is that actually you need to be repetitive. And that sometimes feels a little bit, like you are speaking too much about this thing or that thing.
I know.
But at the end of the day, I also noticed that for myself, Jay, like for anything that I buy online or for anything that I have seen it already a few times.
I know they say you need to see it, 3 times or something at least, or something. Yeah.
I think they say you need to touch base. I don't know. I remember back in the days around 2020, they say that you needed to touch base 7 times or something.
Wow.
Now they say it's even more.
Wow, that's a lot. That's a lot. But it's true though. You do have to say it a bunch of times, even though you wish you only had to say it once. I know what you mean.
Yes, and I agree with you that some of this stuff it's manipulative, and I think there is a fine line. Yeah. I think there is a very fine line between what.
If you are hearing this message, then you're listening to the free version of Jay Brown Yoga Talks. To hear the rest of our conversation, please subscribe to Podcast Premium at jbrownyoga.com/premium.